So, good afternoon. It's just touched 5:05 on this Thursday afternoon in Singapore. On behalf of the South African Chamber of Commerce in Singapore, I'd like to welcome you to today's discussion. Today's discussion is a part one of a two-part series. And basically what we're going to be covering off, it's a how-to guide where we'll be talking about items such as moving your money out of South Africa and the best way to do that. And we will also be discussing in part two more about South African tax residency as it applies to South Africans living abroad. So today we are joined by one of our fellow chamber members, Shiven Mudli, and Shiven is based out of Johannesburg. Shiven is an economist, a treasury expert, and he's also a published author. He's a good friend of mine, and we actually both come from East London and in the Eastern Cape. And basically, Shiven's going to be joining us today to share his expertise on the process of moving funds abroad and, you know, the best way to optimize that. So Shiven, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, this morning in Johannesburg.
Good. Thanks for having me, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to help the guests and the viewers today to just streamline the process overall. So excited about that.
Okay, cool, man. Thanks so much, Shiv. So I think a really good way for us to kick off today is for you to give us a little bit of an insight into, you know, ELA asset management, and as a member of the chamber, tell us more about your business.
Perfect. So ELA Asset Management, we're a young firm, and we like to consider ourselves a very young firm. We've been in the market for the last 5 years, and we're growing in all aspects of business. So we're an authorized dealer in South Africa with a financial service provider with a treasury and asset management background. So we have two segregated parts of our asset management business in which we come together as a whole to unlock value for clients in the treasury perspective, and that's generally corporate treasury, FX solutions, and advisory. And on the asset management solutions, rather more pension funds, the alternative investment space, whether that's dealing with sort of crypto or aspects of new venture capital, crowdfunding platforms that we venture capital in our venture capital projects. So yeah, a little bit about us, and we're young guys in the market, but growing.
I wouldn't say only young, but definitely experienced. From my dealings with you, your knowledge it's really great, man. And I really enjoy your company and your insights that you provide me, not only on, you know, treasury and process, but also on markets. So I think for us to begin, the reason for hosting today's discussion really is in my line of work as a financial advisor here in Singapore to South Africans, the number one question that I get all the time is, okay, so I've just sold my house in South Africa. How do I get the money out of there and get it over here? Or I've just cashed out an investment, or I'm moving my life savings to my new home in Singapore. What's the process? So this was really what prompted this first part of this how-to guide. So I think if we could start with the process, and you could tell us a little bit more about kind of what is a foreign, you know, your single discretionary allowance for foreign investment.
Yep. So perfect. So let's start with the basics, and that's obviously the SDA, which is the single discretionary allowance, which is 1 million, and our foreign investment allowance, which is 10 million. And collectively, the SARB, the South African Reserve Bank in this case, allows you to take out collectively 11 million rand out as an allowance for investment purposes, or particularly for any other purposes, immigration, or in this case. So, I mean, let's just start with some basics. And obviously, as I mentioned, with regards to the FIA, which is your foreign investment allowance, the 10 million, you are required to disclose that with SARS, the South African Revenue Service in South Africa, in order to give you a clearance. So that's subject to the capital that you have in your account. For example, if you're selling your 1 million rand house, for example, now, or 1.2 million, that's, I think SDA will cover the 1 million. So with the 1.2 million rand, you're sending money abroad to Singapore in this example, that 1 million rand will move off your SDA. So you wouldn't really be bothered about applying for a tax clearance in this perspective. However, the 200,000 rand would have to you would have to apply for an application through either your tax advisor or our in-house tax consultants in order to acquire this tax clearance. So you would get a 200,000 rand clearance for the 1.2 million. And with that, you can book a deal via our FX desk and transmit or remit that money to your foreign account. So in that case, key factors to really take into account is that it lasts for a calendar year, not a financial year, which is something that is very, I would say, there's a misconception in that. So it's important to know that from the 1st of January to the 31st of December, you have that 11 million that you can do whatever you want. I mean, it's subject to obviously exchange control rulings, and we always walk the client, we hold their hand in sort of getting through the exchange control, walking them through those standardized processes as well.
Yeah, and obviously you'll be working with both the South African Revenue Service and the South African Reserve Bank, and it's quite arduous process, I'm sure, where if you miss a box or tick the wrong area, then you're not going to get the clearance you need, and you're not going to get the funds overseas.
That's really true. So with the individual side, it's I would love to say it's a straight process, but it comes down to the how open the client is and how willing they are to provide supporting documentation. The easier and the quicker an individual supplies supporting documentation, the easier it is for us to sit with exchange control in this case and move forward into the next process. So it's important to know that exchange control's not out to get you. They're basically the guardians of the Reserve Bank. And they ask a lot of questions at the end of the day, because as institutions, they have to report, obviously, to Prudential Authority. So just some common examples, I mean, with single discretionary allowance, and that's from the first block. The most common usages are travel allowance. And with the travel allowance, it's important to know that you can use your SDA to go abroad. However, supporting documentation in this case you can only purchase it 60 days prior leaving, and you would then need to provide confirmation of your plane ticket in order to use your travel allowance. However, if you move through the aspect of, I'm just going on holiday to Singapore for maybe 3 months or so, you would use your investment allowance and you'd be able to take that over easy peasy without any questions. And you can just say deposits in a foreign bank, and the exchange control and Reserve Bank are very happy with that. There's no problem with that. The study allowance, which is common for parents and kids living, studying abroad, or in this case, parents generally use their SDA to fund their account abroad and then move money into their kids' account, which is very easy. There is also the opportunity, if you have the birth certificate, you can then show that the client, obviously, I think there's a particular birth certificate that you would need, which basically shows both parents. I can't remember the name now, unabridged birth certificate, that's it, in which it has the parent on there as well. So that can be used to move funds directly to the child's account, in this case as a supporting documentation. So also very, very key, sorry to interrupt you there, Mike, is kids under 18 don't have the 11 million. They're subject to 200,000. So that's something important to remember as well.
Interesting. So we've already got our first question here, and everyone, please do feel free to send us questions as we go along. And we'll get to the Q&A section at the end where we'll bring them up. But this one is particularly relevant to the section we're on right now. So Shiv, the question says, is the FRA approval automatically for 10 million rand?
No, unfortunately not. You have to show proof of funds, ideally to SARS. For example, you can go onto the SARS website and view the documentation that's needed, and we assist you in that process. You can either show us the source of funds, in which whether it's coming from your retirement or the sale of a house, that'll be obviously your sale agreement. And we provide that information. If the money's moved into your bank account, we show that information to SARS, and SARS grants that amount of money to you as a tax clearance certificate.
Okay, very good. And the second part to this question is there a difference in the cost based on the amount you apply for?
So the cost, will be the same. So if you're going through a particular consultant, for example, for our clients who wish to have an approval, depending on the volume of the, I would say, the tax clearance certificate, it varies on a customer, depending sometimes, I would say, the complexity, also SARB approvals and tax clearances, but those, I would say, those charges are subject to the tax consultant. If they need to get you up to date in your sort of your compliance with SARS, I would say, because they don't grant the FIA approval until you've up to date with your sort of SARS revenue services. That's a whole different ball game. And I'm sure
Obviously, yeah.
it'll be covered in part two
Yeah.
as well, quite aggressively.
Yeah,
So
so
yes, you have to be up to date with your revenue services and collections for that FIA application as well.
I think it's also important for everyone to understand that the reason that this is in place is also it's a measure to ensure that before you remit funds overseas, you are meeting your liability with the tax man in South Africa, because you can't be sending money out the country when you owe the South African Revenue Service money. So that's a really, really good point. So Shiv, I think if you could also talk to us a little bit more about under common uses, a resident importer.
So a resident importer, so this is quite interesting. And there's tons of small SME businesses and startups in South Africa. And obviously with SONA recently happening, we're obviously moving into that micro lending sort of space from government, which was something very interesting from President Ramaphosa. So within individual importing, so for example, this is our individuals, myself or you, Mike, that are importing clothes or juices or whatever the case is from our foreign supplier. This is limited. So this is limited to ideally 3 transactions. And I would say the consignment has to be less than 50,000 Rand in order to be passed by the exchange control ruling. So anything over this consignment, you would have to have a CCN number. So while I guess ideally building towards your CCN number in the paperwork of getting your CCN number as an importer, you can basically facilitate these transactions less than 50,000 Rand consignments. And you use a particular code, which is 74 times. And that's generally the code that's used as a CCN number. So how we mitigate sort of this aspect for our clients, in particular individual clients, in offering them that sort of boutique SME treasury solution, is we have those import and export facilities with trade finance opportunities. So by facilitating these transactions, we give sort of that client the whole scope and a one-stop shop to say, no worry, while you're busy with your CCN number, use ours. We'll be able to facilitate the transaction collectively for you in a safe, secure manner, obviously regulated space that we play in.
Well, I mean, that's really important, especially to small and medium enterprises that are really reliant on their 30, 60, and 90-day periods of payments. And if they can get the product here sooner because they're able to utilize that service, that's obviously very important to them.
Yeah, I think it's, and with supply disruptions over the last 18 months, I think it's quite important to assist the SME guy as equally as important as you are looking at the larger corporates, because the SME is still the backbone of the economy. They're still facilitating huge amount of employment opportunities for not only graduates, but the mass unemployment issue that we have in South Africa as well. So it's great for us to be in this sort of space to help the little guy as best as we can.
That's awesome. So I think if we can get into a little bit more into the FX solutions that you guys work with for individuals, I know you've given us just a little bit more, but perhaps you can tell us about how people can maximize their SDA, perhaps.
Sure. So SDA is quite useful in the case of if you're already living in Singapore and your money is in South Africa, or you're earning a particular income in South Africa, you can use your SDA to remit that abroad. So that would be your standard process. So generally the SDA function, people use it for investment purposes, either moving money abroad to their foreign account and then investing abroad. The crypto arbitrage has become a popular segment in South African market due to the premium that exists. And I mean, Mike, we've had this conversation, off air, and it's the arbitrage aspect of the market is something that's growing in the crypto dynamic. But individuals tend to use their SDA to loop money into a foreign exchange and back into South Africa. Through regulated individuals and entities that are purchasing the FX. So those are some examples that the 1 million SDA is used for, but commonly used for the aspect of investment purposes abroad. Equally, the FIA, whether it's purchasing vehicles, or I would say it's a very open aspect of the SDA, but they do have limitations to the documentations that you need as well. So 10 million is obviously requires the tax clearance. And again, you have the same variability of an SDA in terms of what you can remit, because now it's looking at your feasibility to move that 10 million that you have available to you. So immigration allowance, and that's obviously a subject aspect that is a common question for guys that are immigrating, that are either financially immigrating or formally immigrating. So I think that's a big difference that we'll discuss a bit further. But the immigration allowance as well, we assist in that process in terms of if you're formally immigrating, we then apply and report that to SARB, and we assist you with the financial or the immigration part of reporting that to SARS on your behalf, and that sort of case. So there's that aspect of it in which we hold the client's hand to get them to the next step, and obviously to fulfill their dream of maybe moving to another country or starting up a new life in another country as well. So super helpful on that one. So the non-resident transfer. So in this case, a client has financially immigrated, and a very big misconception is that when you financially immigrate, you give up your citizenship completely and you no longer belong to the country. I think you've had this question a lot as well. But ideally, you give up your citizenship in South Africa. You don't give up your residency. You're still considered a tax resident in this case of a resident. I would say, yeah, financially immigrating, I would say, yes, you're a non-resident. They classify you. I think I'm just mixing up my words there. You're a non-resident in South Africa. My apologies. You're a non-resident in South Africa, meaning that you fall under a category of a different category in which your funds get suspended when they come back into South Africa. If you're moving money into South Africa. Sorry for the misconception there, guys. My brain was thinking a bit on a different topic. Sorry about that. So
No.
non-resident transfer. Yes. So you earn your annuity in South Africa, and then you would need to move that abroad. That we would obviously have to change your account to a non-resident account. So financially immigrating, you would then close your resident account in South Africa, change your account over to non-resident, and funds will then move from that non-resident account into your offshore account in this case. But if you're moving money back into South Africa, just remember that your funds will be stopped by exchange control, and they will just ask you for a general proof of payment of where those funds came in. In that case, yeah.
So that they would ask for the source of wealth, obviously.
Yes.
Okay, so everyone there, so yes, Shiv's right. This is a question I get. It's I've moved overseas and I have gone through the process of formally immigrating with SARS and the South African Reserve Bank, and I'm no longer a South African resident formally. but they still have citizenship. You don't lose your passport. They can't take it away with you if you leave the country. You will forever be a South African. And unless you get a different passport, then you can choose to keep it or to drop it. That's obviously up to you. But what's really interesting about what Shiv just said there is that you get a non-resident bank account then. So once you've gone through this whole process, you've left the country formally, you've immigrated. So therefore you can't have a bank account to transact within the country, essentially. So you need to have what was previously called a blocked account, but now it's called a non-resident account. Is that correct, Shivan?
Yes. I was just my brain was a bit confused there. I apologize for that one, but yes, you are citizenship, and equally we both know you've formally immigrated, and I'm in the process as well. So yes, citizenship still stays. It's the non-residency that was it. It always gets me. Even though I look through the process, always gets me.
No worries at all. So I think this brings us to the questions that we then had here, which was kind of under the most common questions, which we've covered the first one now. But I think in terms of this, where we get to point 3, where it says, am I limited to what bank I choose? Could you tell us, like, does that mean if you were previously banking with, let's say, a Mercantile or a Standard Bank or an Investec, now you may not be able to do that anymore?
So a very common, I think, misconception in this case is when you apply for financial immigration or immigration in this case, you go through your particular bank. So for example, if I'm banking with FNB in this case, I will go to my bank and say, I am formally immigrating, giving up my non-residency in South Africa. They'll be great. They'll report that to obviously the exchange control, and they'll report that to SARS in this case. But moving money back into South Africa, because there would be a limit. I know the last time I incurred this with Investec with a client, they informally immigrated through Netbank. So Investec are not authorized to touch the transaction for a retail client if they're formally immigrated through that particular bank.
Okay.
Which there is a limitation. I'm not sure if that has changed. I seldom see these, but the last time I did a transaction was like that, was about 3 years ago. Did a transaction like that. I'm not sure if they have changed the policy as yet, but it's something to be careful about. Particularly, we make sure we inform our client that we facilitate our transactions through Mercantile Bank, who was acquired recently by Capitec, that if they formally immigrate through there are limitations, but obviously Capitec does offer that functionality of a non-resident account and a debit card should you come back into South Africa or any case like that.
Okay. And let's say, obviously, many of our listeners are non-residents living abroad, but let's say that you were still considered to be resident and you hadn't gone through the formal immigration process, and perhaps you intend to return to South Africa after your stint abroad. So some of the common questions, and this is actually something I thought was true too, but you told me not, is basically that if you have a single discretionary allowance and you're married, can you not combine your SDA?
So you cannot combine. So a very common question. So as well. So for example, with you and your partner, Mike, you're like, okay, Shiv, I'm ready to move out money out of South Africa, and my partner hasn't used her SDA and I haven't used my SDA. Can I use her 1 million single discretionary allowance and move 2 million out of my account to our account in Singapore? Unfortunately, that cannot happen. So that is a big no-no by exchange control. But you would be able to move R1 million out of your account, and your partner would be able to move R1 million out of her account to a joint account abroad. For example, most commonly partners have a joint account abroad, and that joint account should have both yours and your partner's name on it as a joint account if it's classified a joint account. Money can easily move into those accounts. So single discretionary allowance is obviously to the individual person, and only that individual person can move it from their personal account to an account abroad.
Okay. That makes sense. So moving on to SMEs who import and export, for people whose business is to obviously do this on any scale, what are some of the things they should know?
So very important is the recent change in the SARS sort of process, is the API, AIP, sorry, AIP, which is your Advanced Import Payment Code. So it's a little certificate in which SARS uses you have to disclose that you're doing an advanced import payment, and it's then recorded on the SARS side. So something that we require from our client just to keep on hand should exchange control come back to us. We know that with advanced payments, I'm sure the SME clients that are viewing would know that they receive an advance payment little notification from their bank to supply all the documentation that the goods have landed in South Africa, and we would like to now have that sort of information to market off our balance of payments to ensure everything is a-okay. So that's a little risk mitigation on this case. Bless you. I'm sure you sneezed there. Freight payments, very common as well in other business-related services. Tech-wise, paying sort of generally, I would say tech firms employ someone maybe in Zimbabwe, a consultant in Zimbabwe or Malawi. In this case, you would ideally need particular controls, and we assist you through that process. So there's no hassle with that. So a recent common question as well I've had in the past weeks is, if you're a supplier and you have experienced supply disruptions, and by this I mean you have received an invoice and this invoice has two goods, and now when the supplier has only given you your goods which were part of the invoice, but instead of giving you the second good, say apples, they gave you oranges. So this is a big problem now on exchange control, because exchange control look at it as, why has the invoice changed in this case, and why has goods from your customs declarations that were received at the port, why are they different? And you would have to ideally get this invoice amended by the supplier, and obviously a little letter stating by the supplier and on their letterhead that there was a change in goods due to what was ready for supply constraints, that we would be able to go. Basically, they're changing the invoice to support the goods. So it's something we are discussing with exchange control, because this matter has come up quite a few times already. And I know SMEs don't want the hassle of dealing with exchange control a lot, because they're very straight to the point and very blunt in what they want to do. They generally don't offer a solution, but they're very blunt. So we walk with the client, we hold their hand in this process, and we say, you know what, let us find a solution for the client. Let's find a solution. So we're always in contact with exchange control to tell them, you know what, let's walk with the client, give them the best solutions. And so that's a little common question from there, from the importer side.
Sure.
From the exporter side, you're generally SMEs. I know with the renewable energy aspect of South Africa, there has become a lot of guys that are importing sort of solar energy plants or solar energy equipment from China, from Taiwan, particularly as well. And this case is, some of them are coming to South Africa, but some of them are also going abroad. Some of them are going to Zimbabwe, to Lesotho. They're not really coming to South Africa. So very fine line between merchanting. Yeah, and but we walk with the client with this to get that exchange control ruling. I sit with the client and just understand their process graphically, so we get the best solutions for them, and just to ensure that they're not blocked at later stage or anything like that. So yeah, walking with them, and we give them that guidance wherever they need it.
Again, it comes down to small, medium enterprises. If they can't get their goods due to a delay at the port, or, because, invoice said X, but they received Y, it puts them out, and all of a sudden their cash flow stops. And like you say, also these people are usually SME is 2 or 3 people running a business, and they don't have time to deal with this because they're dealing with all the other parts of the business as well. So obviously having support in that regard is important, and getting it right first time. So I think the next thing which would be important for people to understand is just if they wanted to kind of get funds overseas, how do they do it? And obviously you've classed it here according to your residency. What do they need to show you? Because I mean, obviously they asked, for example, for source of wealth if you're sending money back. Walk us through this.
Okay, so let's go with the process of getting you onboarded to booking your first deal to get your money out to Singapore in this case. So we onboard you and everything is fairly digital from our end. So you would never really put ink to paper or print something out or anything like that. Everything's done via digital, secure two-factor authentication signatures. So for an SA resident, so in this case, you are in South Africa and you want to move money abroad, or you're moving over across to another country, your green barcoded ID book or your SA ID card is what we would need. On your SA ID card, you can send us a photo of the back, and we need both back and front, but photos are acceptable, or scanned is acceptable as well. Preferably, we would like it to be certified, but if not, we would just like to see the photo to authenticate that it does belong to you. So proof of address. So proof of address, we verify when we receive your proof of address, we verify that information across a real bunch of sort of public sourced information. And that's pulled through a network of from across pretty much South Africa platforms that tells us where you've lived, and a bunch of addresses that are associated with you from the past. So in this case, a lot of clients do get upset with us, but ideally it's a due diligence process that the bank will stop you at if we don't stop you. And so if it does not match a proof of address that we have on file, which is sourced on our information platform, we would request a second proof of address. And that's stating that if you provide us with a bank statement, we would like to see maybe a retail account statement that basically verifies that address that you have provided in this case. And then finally, your tax number, which is, I would say second last is your tax number, and not to forget because if we haven't met you in person, you haven't come to our office and we haven't met you, we ask for a selfie of an individual basically holding the ID in front of them, taking a little selfie. And obviously for the guys that have done this with cryptocurrency and sort of thing, everyone asks you to take a little selfie holding your ID just to verify that what you look now, because I can guarantee you I don't look like my ID photo.
So that's obviously for people that are in South Africa wanting to send money abroad. But now let's say that you're living in Singapore and you haven't lived in SA for a number of years, and you don't have an address in South Africa anymore. Kind of what is the process for these people?
So exactly the same information, it will not change. However, 2 proof of addresses are standardly what should be needed. So for example, if you were staying in 102 ABC Road in Singapore, you provide us with maybe a lease agreement or a gas bill. You would need to provide maybe a bank account, basically certifying that you do live at 123 ABC Street, just to verify that those 2 addresses are your address in Singapore or Australia or whatever the case is in that aspect. And for the non-resident individuals, so you basically given up, you formally immigrated in this case, or you basically a Australian now citizen, you live there, you've been there for ages, or in this case. So a passport, exactly the same way, selfie in front of your passport and scanned copy of your passport, 2 proof of addresses are needed. And the TIN number. So the TIN number is generally a reference number of that local country, in which obviously we have to report on that to exchange control or sort of that sort of aspect of it. So entities, yeah. So I mean, sorry to interrupt you there.
Go ahead. No, I was just saying understood. And for everyone, TIN actually just stands for your tax identity number.
Yes.
Cool.
So a little short on that one. Entity-wise, we do request, we reach out for further documentation, but standard KYC protocols are used. So it's important for, I mean, SME guys that are on this call, for example, any intermediary in this case doesn't mean anything bad when they request information. And why the big reason why the bigger institutions, your Standard Bank, your FNB, your Investec, don't request as much information is because you already have a facility there with them. And they already have connections to FinServ, I should say, and the BankServ to pull a lot more information in which what we can gather. So we build the full KYC protocol because we still report to the FSCA and the FIC, sort of everything that needs to be in order is in order. And we, as FSPs, we have to update that regularly on as part of obligations for our FSP licenses as well. So we tend to reach out to the client and obviously have that relationship with the client to say, has anything changed, and we can update KYC for you or anything like that. So always with the clients and all the entities, always, I know it's important for entities and SMEs. We want to give them the best rate. So and the best service collectively. So we're always walking with them. We ask questions for their safety and security because we know the market, and particularly institutions and exchange control, can have, I should say, show their teeth at times. And we wanna make it easy and walk with you, grow with your business equally. So it's always important for us to do that.
Sure. Obviously, like you want to be compliant and above board when you're working with people's money. So that's
Yes.
obviously why this is so important. But something else that you mentioned was also about how just getting the best rate for your clients. Tell us a little bit more about that. And your competitive brokerage rates and everything listed here.
So well, competitive brokerage rates is quite really good, and obviously it's quality of service. So our brokerage rates are subject to volume that's transacted with us, whether it's an SME or an individual. However, we do not exceed 1%. So if you go onto your banking app right now and you're looking at sort of the rate in which you want to buy, say $1, to where the current market spot is, you would see it's generally about 1.5% to 1.6% on average. So we don't go more than 1%, and that's exclusive of that. But that's again subject to volume, but it does not include SWIFT fees. So SWIFT fees are standard. In this, you can cover all your SWIFT fees locally, and that's 500 Rand across the board. Or you can have SWIFT fees shared, in which 250 will go off here in South Africa, and it'll be less 250, whether dollars, Singapore dollars, euros on the other side. Or you can then ask the beneficiary to cover all your charges, in which no intermediary, or I would say SME, would like to have that, because they'll just be short paying on the invoice on that side, or have less money on the other side. So for an individual, it's less money on the other side because the bank will then take the charge there. But locally, we then cover that here in South Africa, so the client will cover that. So personal attention with Ella Treasury. So whether you're on the Ella Treasury side or whether on the asset management side, you have full access to a client service team that can assist wherever needed. And that's from your day-to-day. So if you need specialists on board, again, that is no additional charge. And we love offering this to our clients, is that our advice or any sort of scope that you need of the market is free of charge if you're a client. And Mike, I know you're on our WhatsApp group, both on our crypto side and market report, and that goes out bright and early. Well, to you midday, me bright and early in South Africa. It's the first message you're reading in the morning about what happened overnight and giving you the day rates and where markets are moving collectively. So besides that, you're getting a all-inclusive report. If you're not reading the work on our WhatsApp group, you're reading my reports on investing.com, and that's open source information to anyone that needs sort of more formal understanding. For the investor guys, the formal understanding, but for the retail guys and the simpler guys that I think maybe will watch this video later, I take that complex explanation that's on investing.com for the professional, and I break it down in a 1-minute video on a TikTok for the average investor. So I love sharing knowledge, and I believe knowledge should be free. And when you accumulate so much of knowledge, I love sharing it. And we have 20-minute voice notes to share knowledge and conversation. So it's something I love doing, and sharing knowledge is a huge part. So the dedicated team, moving on to the next point there, is again, full customer service team. You have dealers, you have the asset management team that's on there, that should you need anything, they're more than welcome to assist. And that asset management side is, advice in crowdfunding, property investment, alternative investment solutions, you name it. Our fund managers will be able to assist on that aspect. On the treasury aspect, dealers are there, and they'll be able just to guide you through the process.
Cool. I think also what is going to be really important is for people to understand a little bit more about kind of so obviously corporate, your brokerage charges and how those work. It's quite clear, but in terms of your spreads and how you're able to help people to basically get the best kind of matching for the open market during the day. So if you tell us a little bit more about your treasury service in terms of how, previously, by example, for our listeners, Shivan helped me to move money back to South Africa to pay for my wedding that I've just had in December. And basically, when I looked at using the bank, they offered me X amounts of money arriving in South Africa. And then when Shiv when I gave the mandate to Shiv to bring the money back, he was able to then say, no, I'm going to trade it on these days because this is going to happen. And then I managed to get X amount extra for my money. How do you do that?
So I think let's move to the previous slide. So why Ella in this case? And I think we'll cover that with the efficiency. So the one earlier, yeah, that one. So with sort of the efficiency side is, I'm watching the markets equally, as I sit both on the asset management side of the business and the treasury side. So macro strategy is what I'm comfortable with, and sort of looking at the market, identifying when's the best time to buy and sell for our individuals or our corporates. And with this case, you told me, Shiv, I'm sending this amount of money. Where do you see the rand going? I have this time frame. Can we lock in anything above this level? And I basically was on the phone with you, and I was like, you know what, this is the level. And then you were going to sleep, and I said, you know what, are you comfortable with these levels? Should the market hit this level, I'll secure it for you, and everything will be done. And that's the great part about it. So when we're looking at the individual time frame of settlement, deal to settlement, when Mike's deal was done 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning, on my time, by the time he woke up, or he was going to bed at, I would say, later in the day, his deal was settled into his mercantile account, and we were confirming Standard Bank details for that money to be transferred. So generally, when we work on efficiency, and that's a little graph if the individuals can see, from when corporates book in the morning to deal settlement, it generally takes about a case of, I would say, under 6 hours, but it's generally done within the day. So, which is what's fantastic is non-residents, obviously, you incur the aspect of you need to provide your source of funds, you're working with a time delay. But the guys that are in South Africa have have that aspect. So individuals, obviously, we have that constant communication with you. For corporates, the moment you're onboarded, we have a WhatsApp group created in which you can have direct communication to dealers and the operations team should you need anything. You know, it's time consuming jumping on an email or missing an email in your email box. Now you're just popping onto WhatsApp and saying, hey, dealer one, has my rate kicked in? Can I get this rate? Where do you see the market going? Or any case like that. And we work like that. Dealers work in conjunction with the operations team to settle in a timely manner. And service is our priority. You know, competing against institutions, service is our priority. So making sure the client has everything is a timely matter. With imports or money, FX is time is money. So we ensure that the client gets that best service as possible.
Well, I'm just speaking of time. I'm just mindful of the time now. We're just 10 away from the hour, and so
Sure.
I think something that we could quickly just look at here is this graph that's on the screen here. Could you just tell me what am I looking at on the x-axis and what's on the y-axis, to help the audience understand what this is here?
So this is a recent product I put together for the team, and it's called the Global Currency Program. And I have a lot of friends who are teachers and are teaching abroad in aspects of Somalia, China, Vietnam, and they're teaching English, or they are influencers on social media platforms, whatever the case is. And they have liabilities in South Africa in which they're earning foreign currency. And so just a little example. So for example, on the y-axis on the left-hand side, that is an amount that is subject to $1,000 at the current exchange rate taken at the time compared to numerous banks. And we've then plotted that, and you would notice that the dark line is institutional banks and the light blue line is Ella. So on average, we've saved the client 219 Rand 13 cents per transaction, which is a huge saving to an individual in this case. You know, it covers a lot within obviously inflation in our current environment. It goes a long way. So overall, over the 12-month period, which is our x-axis, that is periods over a month, you can see that the cumulative profit was round about 2,600 Rand, which was a saving. And having both asset management side and treasury side, we're then able to tell the client, you know what, this is what you're saving, that we've saved you on your transaction that you haven't used. Would you like to move it into one of our products, other products in which we run asset management, and whether it's fixed income or property management through our crowdfunding platform. Should you need anything, it's there. So which is great. Fractional share ownership is what we do as well. So it's an aspect in which we constantly giving the client or individual constant growth on their money and letting their money work for them with these savings. So for example, if you're an individual planning to leave South Africa currently, we're able to assist you with this process to issue you with a card and do the FX into this card for you, in which you're able to swipe this card abroad until you set up your foreign banking details. And then you can keep this card with you, always have this card, and you can swipe it whenever you need and move money into it. So you left South Africa in this case to Singapore, and you have money, or you have liabilities like you sending some money to your parents, or you're paying for a bond, or you're still paying for your car, whatever the case is that someone's using. You can then say, you know what, Shiv, I want to give me a full suite of functionality and chat me through how this process will work. And with this case is we can hold a foreign currency account for you, in which you can say, great, I'm doing $1,000 into this account every month. Perfect, it sits there. And then after 3 or 4 months, you're like, great, I have $4,000. You're like, Shiv, where's the Rand going? How does the team see the Rand? What is the best rates? And be like, you know what? The rate is maybe 1580 is in the short term, maybe good with political uncertainty. So we manage that risk for you to say that giving particularly giving us a time frame. We manage that risk for you to say, okay, great, you have a 2-week time frame. We do see the rate here in 2 weeks. And the dealers go about ensuring that they either secure that rate as a futures contract for you. So if you already have the $1,000 in your account, the dealer will go ahead and lock in to sell $1,000 at a future date for you. Or whether the rate is high now at 16 and you want to lock in these rates, they'll lock in for that month in advance because you need that little amount to be paid to your folks account, whatever the case is. So there's that functionality, and your parents or any liabilities that you have, excuse me, are deposited into a call account. So you're never losing out on having not only a debit card, but a call account to have that functionality of you're earning interest, your money is working for you, and it allows us access. And again, you have a full internet suite that you can do and manage your, you can see what we're doing. You know, we love giving the client full visibility because that gives them confidence in us. And that's the most important thing from the product is saving 219 Rand for a teacher goes a long way.
Agreed.
In any case. And you know, we've discussed that when you were teaching as well.
Agreed. Look, I think it's brilliant. So basically what your model is how to be efficient at a fair rate and saving clients money, and then basically also having the facilities that once they've saved that money, you can put that money to work for them to produce a return, because it would have been money that otherwise would have been spent. So look, I'm all about that. It's the best use of your money. It's the best use of your time. I think obviously here are your contact details. And for everyone on the call, if you really want to get to know what Shiven's really talking about on a daily basis, is connect with him on LinkedIn, and you'll be able to see kind of his articles that he writes for investing.com, and all the publications he puts out. It is extremely useful. And the best way to reach you, Shiv, would you say it's by email, or how should people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think it's whichever they feel comfortable. I think reaching over LinkedIn or popping me an email, anything welcome. If you're in South Africa, my number's there. Feel free to give me a call, and we can set up some time and, you know, have a chat. Or if you're in Joburg, as you know, we're in Joburg, I can come out to you and we can discuss, you know, solutions for your business as well.
That sounds awesome. Look, everyone, I know it's quite a lot to digest, but it is quite a technical subject. And so something that people keep would like a little bit more clarity on, just looking at our question section here, is just if we could for one more time say that if I'm a non-resident, okay, I live overseas, I have made the authorities at the South African Reserve Bank know that I no longer reside in South Africa. I've let South African Revenue Service know that I don't live in South Africa. What happens to my bank accounts? Those bank accounts are my transactional accounts that I did have with Standard Bank per se. Are those now closed? What happens?
So they would move over to a non-resident account. So if you formally, say, immigrated or become a non-resident in this case, you have your citizenship, but you're a non-resident, your account is moved from a resident to a non-resident, in which you are allowed a debit card. I think it is. Credit facilities are subject to, I think, quite a few constraints, but I'm not sure if it is available, and that's subject to, I think, different banks. Sure. In this case, but I know you can get a debit card. That'll be easy peasy.
Right. So this bank account then that is classed as a non-resident bank account, it is then a non-transactional bank account. Is that correct?
Transactional bank account it is. So you can use it to facilitate transactions. So if you're living abroad and now coming to South Africa, for one, you can get a card issued by the bank. To swipe, but ideally funds are going to be blocked by the time. So if you did a transaction from us to your account, your call account, from your call account to your FNB non-resident private wealth account, for example, funds between that little line between us and the bank will be blocked, where your private banker will contact us and say, hey guys, can I just have a source of funds? Where did it come from? And then they'll release it on their end, and then the rands are available to use.
Sure. So, but in terms of being able to run debit orders off of that bank account and pay multiple different parties from a non-resident account, is that possible and is it allowed?
That would be allowed. I think I'm not sure. I'm not very familiar on the banking side and how the bank
Sure.
will regulate that. But from my experience, I have seen a few clients that do have debit orders that run off their sort of debit account because money continuously moves in.
Okay.
But they were based in South Africa at that time as a non-resident.
Sure. Okay. Well, look, everyone, I hope that answers the question. And if you still don't understand, next week in part two of this series, we are going to be meeting with Mariska de Bruin, and Mariska is the director of Mint Accounting, and she is an expert in non-residency status. So please do join us same time next week on Thursday to run through the new process of what it means to cease your residence. And essentially what Mariska is going to update us on is what has changed since they phased out financial immigration. So it's one not to be missed, and we're going to basically cover off a lot more of the topics that we've discussed here today as it regards to non-residents. So please do join us. But Shivan, on behalf of the Chamber, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and sharing what you know and your knowledge. It's been extremely interesting. And we appreciate your time.
It's a pleasure. Look forward to, and I mean, if anyone has any questions, more than welcome to hold your hand and get you through that non-resident process. So don't stress, don't panic. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, don't panic. Yeah, I'll hold your hand, walk you through the process, and make sure all the ducks are in a row for you to be safe and sound on the other side.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ivan. And everyone, if you haven't already, please check out our social medias. We are the South African Chamber of Commerce Singapore on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Have a good evening, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Bye.